Okay, I'll make the 3 points briefer. See, the first issue that we want to focus on is, well, the claim was made that the terms of coexistence between the religious and the secular have to be renegotiated, and that the religious has to cede ground to the secular. Of course, to make such claims, you first have to know how you can make this distinction. What makes something religious? What makes something secular? What characteristics does the religious have as opposed to the secular? And how can we even see that one of the two is ceding ground to the other? And just to give an example, the formulation of secularism that Achin has given talks about the good of humans in this life as opposed to the religiously transcendent. Now, does that make sense as a general formulation? In the contrast between this life in this world, which is a temporary thing and a bodily material thing, and the other life in the other world, as we said before, is a distinction internal to Christianity. It's not as though you can talk about Asian traditions distinguishing between this life here on earth and the other life in some religiously transcendent sphere. So we don't think that all traditions and all societies divide human existence into these two spheres, and that therefore the distinction itself between the religious and the secular in Achin's account fails to make sense. The second point is related to this problem of secularization. It is undeniable that secularization has taken place and that the influence of religion has declined in India. Our question is, how do we establish that? How do we see, say, 200 years ago, religion was more dominant than today? How do you see which things have to disappear to make the religious disappear? In a way, if you say that we need to introduce modern notions of equality and liberty, and religion has to be privatized, well then a certain form of Protestant society is the perfectly secularized society. But of course, that kind of Protestant society is a religious society. So how do you make sense of this notion of secularization as a decline of religion? And how do you defend that notion in contrast to the notion that we're defending, namely that secularization is the spread of religion in another guise? And that what are called modern notions today, that the majority of these notions are actually Protestant Christian notions in secular guise. Now, that brings us to the third point. There's a huge difference, it was claimed, between modern notions of tolerance, justice, etc., and pre-modern notions of tolerance, justice, etc. And the modern notions are superior. Now, the question, of course, is how can you test the superiority of a set of notions as opposed to another set of notions? And we can imagine that this happens, say, for scientific theories, that you can show that Einsteinian physics is superior to Newton's physics. But how do you do it for these modern notions and pre-modern notions? And you examine how well they've solved problems in society? It's not as though we've done that. We've not examined, well, pre-modern notions of tolerance in India were this successful and modern notions are much more successful. The claim was made about passive tolerance, the pre-modern being a passive tolerance, which is indifference, and therefore inferior to the modern notion of tolerance, which is active tolerance. Now that itself, you might as well reverse the two. You might say, see, active tolerance shows that you feel that there's something to be tolerated, that difference is problematic and has to be tolerated, while indifference is superior because it doesn't require that kind of experience where difference itself becomes problematic. It's just accepted as a part of human existence and life in society. So I don't see how we can establish that modern notions of tolerance and justice are clearly superior to pre-modern notions.
Yeah.